Mr. Aiden gently stroked her hair, feeling the tenderness from each strand. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with all the emotions they had suppressed for so long. Mr. Aiden's hands found Alice's hands, holding them tightly as if afraid that if he let go, this moment would disappear forever. The feeling of closeness awakened something in his heart, a longing that had been hidden deep within. And now, under Mr. Aiden's loving gaze, it was gentle but powerful. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our channel, where the most dramatic and fascinating stories in life are always waiting for you. We promise to bring you from one surprise to another, making you unable to take your eyes off. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our episodes. And if you love Jane, check out our playlist to discover more of her captivating stories. In today's video, we will send you the story, The Fish Girl and the Old Man, told through Jane's special voice. Follow along and feel the interesting things this story brings. Hope you have a great experience. On a summer afternoon, the sweltering heat seemed to fill the air. On the small road leading to the district market, there were few shops, only a few people left. The faint sound of knives and chopping boards cutting through the heavy silence. A woman carrying dried goods from the village to the market stood on the corner of the street with baskets of dried fish still full but not yet sold. Sweat was dripping down her tanned face. Her eyes glanced at the sparse flow of people passing by, her heart heavy with worries. Every day she has to travel nearly half an hour from the village to the market to sell goods, but lately business has become increasingly difficult. Sister Alice, why aren't you complaining today? The voice of a saleswoman next door rang out. Oh, business has been slow lately, sister. Alice sighed, her eyes filled with sadness. It's almost afternoon and I still haven't sold much. If I go home without any money, how will I take care of the kids at home? Alice has 3 children. The youngest is just over 10 years old, and the 2 older ones are also of school age. She is used to hard work, leaving home early in the morning to earn some money to support her family. Her husband, Hi, was the solid pillar of the family. He was a construction worker, a hard job but a steady income that provided for his wife and children. Hi was gentle and always loved Alice deeply, putting family first. However, in a sudden scaffolding collapse while working, Hi was seriously injured. Since that accident, he has not been able to do heavy labor as before. Unable to continue working to support his family financially, Hi gradually became self-conscious and had low self-esteem. Although he tried his best to find a lighter job within his ability, his poor health prevented him from contributing as much as before. This made Hi even more depressed. He spoke less, and sometimes just sat silently in lingering sadness. Alice was lost in thought when she suddenly saw a middle-aged man walking towards her from across the street. He was a regular customer at the market. His name was Aiden. Mr. Aiden was a retired veteran who lived alone in a house near the district market. It is rumored that Mr. Aiden was divorced. Since his separation from his wife, he has been single, living solely on his pension. Alice isn't home yet? It's so hot and you're still selling. Mr. Aiden spoke up, his voice full of concern. I was going to pack up, but if I stay, I might be able to sell a little more, Alice replied, still holding out hope. You probably can't sell everything, right? Mr. Aiden looked at Alice's goods and smiled lightly. How about this? You just carry it to my house nearby. I'll buy a few things for you so it'll definitely help reduce the burden a bit. Alice hesitated for a moment, but then she thought of the remaining goods and the hunger that awaited her children at home and nodded in agreement. She slowly carried the fish on her shoulder pole, following Mr. Aiden. The 2 figures walked towards the end of the market, where a brown tiled house lay peacefully under the shade of a banyan tree. Mr. Aiden's house appeared under the shade of a large banyan tree, lying peacefully at the end of the road leading out of the market. The house was simple, but neat. The wooden door was old, the tiled roof was covered with moss, stained by time. Mr. Aiden led Alice into the house, opening the window to let in the light and cool the stuffy air. You can leave your stall in the corner of the house. Mr. Aiden said, pouring out 2 glasses of cold water. It's tiring to go out selling in this weather. Let's take a break to cool down and then think about it. Alice sat down on the chair beside him, slightly confused. She was used to the indifference and hustle and bustle of the market, so meeting a caring and kind person like Mr. Aiden made her feel both comfortable and at peace. Thank you. I'm so happy to meet a kind person like you when I go to the market, Alice said sincerely. There are still many empty houses, so it's even more fun for a single person like me to have guests. Mr. Aiden smiled lightly, his face gentle and calm. Just pick me the best fish. That should be enough for me to eat for a few meals. Yes, let me choose. Alice carefully picked out some dried fish, wrapped them up, and gave them to Mr. Aiden. She looked around the house, realizing that this must have once been a close-knit family home. On the wooden shelves were some old photos, along with small souvenirs. Mr. Aiden saw Alice's eyes drifting over each item in the house, then said, "You must find these things strange, right? There used to be enough people in this house, but everyone left. Now I'm the only one living a frugal life." Alice was touched, and her heart sank. She understood the feeling of loneliness in her unhappy family life. Someone like you will probably live peacefully. Alice smiled, somewhat comforted. My family is different. It's very difficult. Selling things at the market only earns a little money to support the children. As for my husband, Alice hesitated. He can't help much. Mr. Aiden nodded, his eyes sympathetic. Women today still suffer a lot. You are young, but life is so tiring. If you need any help, just consider me a friend. Don't be shy. Alice looked at Mr. Aiden with warm eyes, feeling for the first time that someone was listening and understanding her. She didn't say anything more, but she felt relieved inside. After paying and packing her goods, Alice stood up, thanked Mr. Aiden, and asked permission to leave. The afternoon sun is so hot, why don't you rest a bit and then go home? If you need me, come to my house, Mr. Aiden said. Thank you so much. Meeting a good person like you, I feel lucky in my life. Mr. Aiden just smiled. He looked thoughtful as he watched Alice leave, a feeling of both familiarity and strangeness rising in his heart. It had been a long time since he had met anyone who made him feel so melancholy. Alice's load was lighter, but her thoughts were heavy. Alice's shadow stretched along the familiar village road. The trees rustled as if listening to the deep thoughts she had kept close to her heart. When Alice got home, her 3 children were gathered at the door. They rushed out to greet her with joy, and her heart felt at ease. The children's smiles brought her a sense of peace, like a gentle force that soothed her worries. Dinner that night was still the usual simple food. The children happily told stories of the day as they ate. Hi, Alice's husband, returned when the lights were already flickering outside the alley. Where's the mother? How much did you earn today? Hi said in a probing voice, his red eyes looking at the dishes on the dinner tray. Alice was silent, trying to stay calm. She didn't want her child to witness her parents arguing. Hi sat down at the dinner table, hastily picked up a few pieces, then stood up and climbed onto the old bed. Seeing her husband languishing day by day, unable to earn money, Alice felt an endless pain. She only wished for a peaceful life for her children, but she didn't know when she would be free from this suffering. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Alice sat by her little bed. The moonlight shone through the window, illuminating her sad face. She thought of Mr. Aiden again, the man with kind eyes and warm words. She had never met anyone who treated her so kindly before. She felt a little comforted, but also anxious. She wondered if it was too much to expect kindness and understanding, something her husband had long since withheld from her. Every night, Alice lay awake, unable to sleep. She thought about her life, about the hard days, about the lonely path she had walked for so long. The appearance of Mr. Aiden was like a small ray of light in her dark life, but could she allow herself to think about a change? The tangled thoughts swirled around in her head, becoming more and more evident. Alice told herself to concentrate on her work. Today she had to go to the market early again, to prepare for another day of selling. Early the next morning, Alice prepared to go to the market as usual. The air was still a bit chilly. The first rays of sunlight gently spread across the dirt road. Alice walked calmly, her heart still filled with the feeling from yesterday's conversation with Mr. Aiden. A vague hope crept into her heart, but she told herself to forget it and focus on her life. When Alice arrived at the market, the business scene was bustling and noisy. She found a familiar spot and started selling. Crowds walked back and forth, but they still only looked over, making Alice a little worried, afraid that today would be another slow day. "Hello, Alice? You're early to the market today." A familiar voice rang out behind her. Alice turned around to see Mr. Aiden standing there with a warm smile. His eyes lit up when he saw her, as if this meeting had been expected. "Yes, I came early to make some extra money," Alice replied, unable to hide her cheerfulness amid the chaos. "Let me buy you some things to support you," said Mr. Aiden, picking out some dried fish that Alice had dried carefully in advance. "Were you tired yesterday? You looked busy today." "Oh, nothing much. Just the housework sometimes makes me worry," Alice replied softly. Seeing her slightly sad expression, Mr. Aiden pondered for a moment and then said, "Alice, whenever you need quiet, need a room to confide in, just come to my house. Just consider me a friend. I don't want to see you endure everything alone forever." Alice looked slightly confused. "Thank you. I really don't know what to say. You are such a great person to me." The conversation between the two seemed to ease Alice's worries. They talked about many things, from the ups and downs of life to Mr. Aiden's simple memories of his youth. Each of his stories exuded a quiet and precious memory. Around noon, after walking around the market, Mr. Aiden said goodbye to Alice but did not forget to say, "Remember what I said. If anything happens, come find me." Alice smiled and bowed her head, her heart filled with gratitude. Mr. Aiden left, and she continued her work. That whole morning, Alice felt lighter, as if she had a spiritual support to help her firmly overcome the difficulties ahead. That afternoon, Alice packed up her goods and prepared to go home. On the way, Mr. Aiden's warm words kept coming to her mind, leaving her with an indescribable feeling. She never thought she would meet someone who could make her feel so comforted. Back home, Alice was busy cooking and taking care of her children as usual. But throughout the evening, the image of Mr. Aiden kept appearing in her mind. His stories, his thoughtful and gentle manner, all left a deep impression on her. More than gratitude, Alice felt a new thought in her heart, a desire for peace, something that she had been searching for all this time in her unstable family life. That night, Alice sat by the window watching the moonlight shine through the crack in the door, illuminating the small house. She thought about her life, the years of being a wife and mother full of hardship and sacrifice. She knew that she could not change the past, but it seemed that in her heart there was a desire to be cared for, to be listened to and understood comfortably by someone. Partly she blamed herself for letting her mind wander to Mr. Aiden. The man had only good intentions, and she had a family and a duty to take care of her husband and children. The next morning, Alice woke up earlier than usual. She planned to go to the market early to avoid the heat, and also to have time to meet Mr. Aiden, although she did not know if she would have the chance to see him again. When she arrived at the market, it was still a bustling, noisy morning like any other day, but she felt a little expectant. Towards evening, when Alice was preparing to pack up her things, Mr. Aiden suddenly appeared, still with that quiet smile. He walked over and greeted her with his gentle eyes as usual. Alice felt relieved and happy as usual. "I thought you weren't coming today," said Alice, unable to hide her delight. "Then you're disappointed again, aren't you?" "Mr." Aiden joked, his warm eyes fixed on Alice. The two chatted for a while, and Mr. Aiden bought some dried fish. Alice found herself opening up more, no longer being as closed off as before. She began to share with him stories about her family, about her simple dreams, just hoping that her children would get a good education and life would be less difficult. Mr. Aiden listened attentively, nodding sympathetically. "Just keep trying and things will get better. Just keep your mind at peace and life will find a way to work out." When they parted, Mr. Aiden left Alice a small box. It was a gift he wanted to give to her children. Alice wanted to refuse, but seeing his sincere eyes, she couldn't bear to. Looking at the gift in her hand, her heart was filled with an indescribable feeling, both gratitude and a little quiet excitement. Alice returned home with a small gift from Mr. Aiden, her heart filled with joy. When her children gathered around her to open the gift, finding sweet candies and a few small books, they shouted with joy, their faces beaming. It had been a long time since Alice had found such happy smiles, and she herself could not help but smile. However, the joy quickly gave way to anxiety. Alice began to wonder whether she should think about Mr. Aiden anymore. Was a married woman entitled to seek comfort in another man? Alice felt both encouraged by the sympathy, but also worried about what might happen if others found out. That night, Alice sat by the window, watching the sparse lights of the houses in the distance. She knew what she was doing and what she wanted, but she couldn't deny the feelings growing inside her. Life with her husband was just bland days, full of silent pain. But Mr. Aiden was like a cool breeze, the one who soothed her loneliness, the one who listened and comforted her, understanding the confidences she had never expressed. Alice's mind was always in a battle between reason and personal emotions. Part of her wanted to continue her relationship with Mr. Aiden, not because she wanted to take advantage of him, but because she craved the sympathy and appreciation she had never had. But the other part of her was afraid of the consequences, afraid of the prying eyes of the world and the gossip. Her life was already difficult enough. She did not want to complicate it. Today, Alice deliberately packed up her things earlier than usual, hoping to avoid Mr. Aiden so that her heart would not be disturbed any further. She tried to convince herself that everything was best left alone, but no matter how hard she tried, her heart could not stop thinking about Mr. Aiden, about the warmth and comfort he brought. She realized that the more she avoided him, the more she longed for him. As Alice was packing up her wares at the end of the day, a familiar voice suddenly rang out. "Miss Alice, was there anything fun at the market today?" Alice turned around and saw Mr. Aiden standing there, smiling gently as usual. Her heart suddenly beat faster, partly happy but also filled with fear. She smiled, trying to act normal. "Yes, the market is a bit slow today, sir. Not many sales," Alice replied, her voice faltering. Mr. Aiden looked at her. His eyes seemed to understand her thoughts. He didn't say anything more, just asked gently, "If there's anything, just tell me. Don't keep it to yourself." Alice hesitated for a moment, then nodded, saying nothing more. Mr. Aiden's presence at this moment was like a gentle reminder that she didn't have to face life alone, that she had the right to be cared for and shared. But at the same time, this care also made her feel like she was standing at a crossroads, not knowing whether to continue or stop. In the days that followed, Mr. Aiden's image continued to linger in Alice's mind. Even though she tried to walk all the way, every time she saw him at the market, she found herself unable to hide her feeling of elation. She felt the warmth in his eyes, the thoughtfulness and kindness that reminded her of the innocent feelings of her youth when everything was pure and peaceful. As for Mr. Aiden, as each day passed, Alice became a part of his thoughts. He never thought he could be attracted to a simple woman like Alice. Her quiet gentleness just drew him in, and there was no way to stop it. One late afternoon, when the market was starting to empty, Mr. Aiden came to Alice's stall. She was meticulously arranging the remaining packages of dried fish, taking care of them carefully and diligently. In the late afternoon sunlight, Alice's black hair fluttered lightly, creating a dreamy scene. Mr. Aiden stood still for a moment, his heart filled with compassion. He wanted to say something to her, but hesitated for a long time before saying, "Miss Alice, can I ask you a favor?" His voice was soft but a little nervous, something he himself did not understand why. Alice looked up, met his eyes, gently surprised, but quickly smiled. "Yes, how can I help you?" Mr. Aiden looked into her gentle eyes. It's not very convenient for me to move around these days. Or, if possible, every time there's new dried fish, could you deliver it to my house? Alice hesitated. She wasn't used to delivering things to people's homes, but the sincere look in his eyes made it hard to refuse. Okay, I'll bring it over when I get some new stuff, she replied softly, feeling a strange sense of confusion. Mr. Aiden smiled with satisfaction. For the first time in years of being single, he felt his heart filled with joy at hearing that simple answer. He couldn't help but imagine future meetings in the quiet of his home, where it would be just her and him, no one else. The first day of delivery came sooner than Alice had expected. That afternoon, she carried her goods to Mr. Aiden's house, reassuring herself that it was just a normal job. But when she stood in front of the old wooden door, she felt a sense of excitement that was different from any previous delivery. Mr. Aiden was waiting. When he saw Alice, he immediately opened the door and invited her in with an indescribable look in his eyes. Alice followed him inside, sat down on a small wooden chair in the living room, and couldn't help but be surprised to see the classic objects in the quiet house. Mr. Aiden brought her some water and sat across from her, his eyes quietly watching Alice's every move. Your house is so beautiful and quiet, not as noisy as the market, Alice said softly, her eyes looking around with admiration. Mr. Aiden smiled, his eyes shining with warmth when he saw Alice so comfortable. Living alone for a long time, everything here is quiet. Sometimes I just wish someone would come and talk to me for fun, so having you come to visit my house makes me feel more lively. His sincere words touched Alice's heart. She was embarrassed, but replied softly, I'm very happy that you invited me in. It's really rare for me to sit and talk like this. After that, every time there was a new shipment, Alice would go to Mr. Aiden's house. Each time they met, the distance between them became a little closer. Alice began to get used to the quiet house, with every little corner where Mr. Aiden would always leave a chair for her to sit and rest. Every time Alice came, Mr. Aiden always listened attentively to her stories, even the simplest things, and Alice also felt more comfortable sharing with him. Gradually, she realized that she was not only here to deliver goods, but also to see him, to feel the care and comfort she had been looking for all this time. Just like that, every time she went to Mr. Aiden's house, Alice felt more natural, as if this place had become a familiar destination. She was no longer just a delivery person, but had become a member of that peaceful space. With Mr. Aiden by his side, Alice's presence became something he looked forward to every day, making him feel that life was meaningful. One afternoon, while Alice was packing up her fish, her hair accidentally fell down, revealing her fair skin under the sunlight. Mr. Aiden sat opposite, unable to take his eyes off the scene. His heart pounded, and he had to quickly turn away, trying to suppress his longing. After finishing the arrangement, Alice looked up slightly and met his eyes. They looked at each other for a moment without saying anything, but those eyes seemed to contain many unspeakable things. From today, both of them understood that a hidden love had been revived between them. Both of them tried to keep their distance, but in each of their hearts, that hidden love grew bigger and bigger, unable to be covered up. A few days later, Alice went to Mr. Aiden's house to deliver the goods as usual. After putting down her load and arranging the dried fish packages on the wooden table in the kitchen, she turned to see Mr. Aiden standing at the kitchen door, looking at her with a thoughtful gaze. His quiet appearance made her feel her heart suddenly groan, as if there was something between them that could not be said in words. An emotion that had been silently lurking, waiting for a chance to flare up. Alice was slightly confused by that gaze, her cheeks slightly red. She was about to leave after finishing her arrangements, when suddenly, a heavy rain poured down outside. The downpour came and hit the roof tiles. The sound of rain pouring down was strong. Both of them ran back into the house, turned towards the door as if listening to each raindrop that was falling. The whole space seemed to be submerged in a white curtain of rain. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, like a curtain separating the quiet house from the outside world. Miss Alice, it's raining hard. Looks like you'll have to wait a bit before you can go home, Mr. Aiden said, his voice low, but his eyes filled with something indescribable, both warm and expectant. Alice looked outside. She knew it was too late to go home in the rain, but staying at Mr. Aiden's house made her feel strangely confused. "No, it's raining so hard I can't go home yet," she said, her voice dropping as if she could feel the turmoil inside her. "Then stay for lunch with me," Mr. Aiden offered, his warm smile making her feel welcome. "Actually, I prepared a simple meal. Eating alone is boring. It's much more fun with you staying." Alice felt a little hesitant, but finally she nodded gently. "Yes, if it's not too much trouble, I'd like to stay," Alice replied. Mr. Aiden put the food on the table and quickly sat down. The simple yet delicious smell of food spread throughout the room, mixed with the sound of rain falling outside, adding to the warmth in the kitchen. They sat facing each other, and without any distance, became more intimate than ever. Mr. Aiden sat still looking at her, as if Alice's every gesture, every expression contained something profound. Alice hesitated for a moment, but tried to stay calm, gently picking up the food. Her hands moved gently and gracefully. The natural yet feminine movements made Mr. Aiden unable to take his eyes off. Alice's indifference made his heart feel strangely warm. His eyes became more and more passionate, as if he was caught up in every charming moment that Alice brought. "Miss Alice," Mr. Aiden's voice rang out, warm and full of passion. "Do you know, since you came, this house seems to have more vitality. For a long time, I have been used to a lonely life, thinking that nothing can change. But when you appeared, everything was very different." Alice smiled, her eyes flickering to him for a moment in confusion. "Oh, it makes me feel awkward when you say that." "I was just delivering the goods," she replied, but inside she felt a strange warmth and closeness. "No," Aiden replied, his eyes never leaving her. "You may not understand, but your presence means a lot to me. I really like you." Alice blushed slightly, but an indescribable feeling of warmth rose in her heart. She lowered her head, not knowing how to respond. Her hands unconsciously clamped the hem of her shirt, as if wanting to hold back something that was overflowing in her heart, amidst the sound of the pouring rain outside. Mr. Aiden gently touched Alice's hand, gently holding her hand. His gentleness but longing made her unable to pull her hand away. Her heart beat strongly, matching the sound of the falling rain. "Miss Alice, I can't deny that I miss you very much and wish you would come over to my house more often," Mr. Aiden said softly, his voice warm but filled with tender emotions. Alice looked up, her clear eyes filled with emotion. She said nothing, but her eyes said it all. In front of him, she could not hide her weakness, shyness, and slight disappointment. She herself did not understand why she was so attracted to him, but at this moment, she just wanted to enjoy that closeness. Mr. Aiden stood up, still gently holding her hand, and led her into the inner room. She followed him with every step, confused, but unable to resist his pull. When the door closed, only their eyes and breaths were mixed together. Mr. Aiden approached, his eyes gentle and sincere. Without hesitation, he gently hugged her. Alice was silent in his arms. A feeling of warmth and safety enveloped her. She didn't want to think about anything else. In the quiet room, there was only the sound of rain and the breathing of two people. A romantic and sweet feeling filled her heart. Mr. Aiden gently stroked her hair, feeling the softness of each strand. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with all the emotions they had been holding back for so long. Mr. Aiden's hand found Alice's. She held his hand tightly, as if afraid that if she let go, this moment would disappear forever. That feeling of closeness awakened something in my heart, a longing that had been hidden deep within my soul. Now, under Mr. Aiden's loving gaze, it was gentle but strong. Mr. Aiden pulled Alice closer. His fingers gently caressed the soft skin on her arm, then slowly stopped at her small shoulder. That gentle feeling was like magic, making Alice feel waves of emotion spreading throughout her body. His eyes stopped on her face. His gaze was deep, containing everything he wanted to give Alice. Miss Alice. Aiden's voice was thick, with a hint of uncontrollable repression in it. He moved closer, his warm breath touching her skin, making her shiver. Alice knew this moment was no accident. It was that look in his eyes, so gentle and appreciative, that made her unable to resist his pull. At that moment, Mr. Aiden leaned down, his lips gently touching her cheek, as gentle as a cool breeze but carrying a burning feeling in her heart. Alice felt each flash of emotion surge up, as if awakening something deep in her soul. Then, as if he could no longer restrain himself, his lips slowly moved closer, stopping right in front of hers, as if he wanted to ask, as if he wanted to probe the unexpected truth. Alice took the initiative to close her eyes, gently pursed her lips, and touched him. Tenderness and passion seemed to burst forth in this moment. Mr. Aiden responded with a passionate and longing kiss without hesitation, without fear, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. That kiss was not just an action, but an unspoken word, his way of letting her know about the secret feelings he had hidden in his heart. In a sweet and private space, both seemed to blend together. No more boundaries, no more distinctions. Alice didn't know when her heart had completely sunk, like a boat lost in the ocean with Mr. Aiden at the helm. Her heart was beating faster than ever, and as Alice's clothes were removed layer by layer, her whole body trembled. Mr. Aiden was amazed and quite surprised by the beautiful landscape painting that was revealed before him. He held it carefully, slowly, and enjoyed the moment of sublime ecstasy that was hard to describe. Both of them were immersed in a storm of emotions that made them feel like they were lost in cloud nine. They gradually forgot about reality, forgot everything around them. Only two souls were left merging together, where reason could not overcome the desire of emotions. Time seemed to stop, leaving only these brief moments, moments of deep and intense connection, a moment that both of them would continue to engrave in their hearts, so that every time they remembered it, they wouldn't want to stop. Just like that, more than 2 hours passed. When everything had calmed down, Alice lay in Mr. Aiden's arms, feeling his strong heartbeat. She knew that her life had taken a new turn, a path full of challenges and risks. But right now, in this man's arms, she felt a strange peace, a feeling she had never had before. The rain outside was still falling steadily. Each raindrop pattering on the roof seemed to wash away all worries and sadness. The two of them did not say another word, just quietly together to enjoy the memorable moment that they knew would forever be an unforgettable memory in their hearts. After that fateful encounter, Alice and Mr. Aiden were no longer strangers. A strong, secret emotion bound them together. But from that moment on, each person's life became difficult to leave the other. This relationship, though full of danger, became a great joy and comfort for both. It made them forget their daily worries. At first, Alice still went to the market as usual, but her heart was no longer in work. Every time there were no customers, Alice looked forward to seeing Mr. Aiden waiting for her at the familiar corner of the market. His gaze towards her now was no longer one of mere concern, but of a secret yet longing, waiting gaze. Every time Mr. Aiden invited Alice to his house, whether it was just for a drink or a chat, she felt like she couldn't refuse. And of course, there was that deeper part. They saw each other more often in the following days, mostly at noon when Alice had sold out. One day, Mr. Aiden was waiting for her at the market, just silently nodding to her and leading her through the small, less frequented streets to the quiet house at the end of the street. No one knew about these meetings, and the secrecy only made their feelings stronger. They did it together in every corner of Mr. Aiden's house, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes in the bedroom, even right in the living room. Alice increasingly neglected her work at the market. She was no longer interested in the steady sales job she had before. Instead of working hard as usual, Alice often made excuses to leave the market early, sometimes in the afternoon, when other vendors were still busy with their business. The vendors around the market began to whisper, saying that she seemed to be neglecting herself. But Alice didn't care much about those words. Her heart now only thought of her dates with Mr. Aiden, where she could forget all the sadness and pressure. That day, Alice went to Mr. Aiden's house as usual, full of joy and anticipation. As soon as she entered the house, she saw him standing in the living room, waiting for her with a caring gaze. She smiled happily, extremely gently, as she stepped into his arms. Without needing to say a word, the two of them silently hugged each other, as if in this moment all worries disappeared. Mr. Aiden led Alice into the inner chamber, the quiet room that they had both come to regard as their secret hideout. In the dim light of the chamber, Alice felt all the barriers in her heart melt away. Mr. Aiden gently stroked her hair, his hands gradually becoming warmer and more intimate. They sank into each other, ignoring everything around them, just to enjoy this peaceful and dangerous feeling. Alice did not return to the market all that afternoon. The unfinished goods, the unsold packages of dried fish, none of it mattered anymore. She returned home with a dreamy look in her eyes, carrying a feeling of annoyance and anxiety in her heart. She knew she couldn't live in this secret relationship forever, but it was also difficult to stop. Aiden became the man she had always wanted, someone she longed to look to for protection and comfort. In subsequent encounters, Alice became more and more adventurous. She tried to leave the market early and avoided acquaintances, afraid that someone would notice her frequent absences. Mr. Aiden also always waited for her with longing, as if they were both living in a separate world where no rules or prejudices existed. However, no information could be kept hidden forever. The villagers and the market vendors began to notice and gossip. They noticed that Alice was less and less present at the market. When she was present, she would yawn and not care about her work. Someone even caught a glimpse of Alice and Mr. Aiden going in another direction in the afternoon, causing the whispers to grow more and more. Alice also gradually felt the scrutiny, but deep down, she still ignored everything to continue this relationship. As time goes by, Alice gets deeper and deeper into this dangerous relationship. Her feelings and desires for Mr. Aiden make her feel that her life is more meaningful, but at the same time, it is also full of worries. She knew she was drifting away from her job, away from everything familiar. But every time she thought of him, she couldn't give up. The two of them had charted a dangerous path where every step was fraught with unforeseen risks. Alice knew that one day the truth would come to light, but right now, she didn't want to stop. In Aiden's arms, she felt the love and protection she had always longed for. The day was cloudy, thick black clouds covered the sky. The wind blew outside, signaling an approaching storm. Alice went to Mr. Aiden's house like every other time, her heart filled with anticipation. Mr. Aiden was waiting for her in the quiet apartment, his eyes full of warmth and affection. The two quickly sank into each other's arms, as if to forget all the worries left outside. The sound of the wind howling outside the window, each rapid breath, but all became faint and distant background sounds. Alice and Mr. Aiden were together in the warm room. Only the dim light passing by gave them a mysterious sense of peace. In his arms, Alice felt a sense of security and happiness that she had longed for. Suddenly, there was a loud clap of thunder and lightning flashed outside the window. Both of them were startled. Before Alice could come to her senses, there was a loud knocking on the door, along with the sound of the wind whistling. The door flew open, banging against the wall. Then a towering figure appeared in the flash of light. Hi, Alice's husband, was standing there. His entire body was drenched in the rain. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was covered with anger and despair. His hair was disheveled. The rain washed away the dirt on his face, making him look like a storm had just stormed into the house. Both Alice and Mr. Aiden were silent for a moment, unable to say a word. Hi looked straight at them, his eyes full of anger. The pain in his heart could not be hidden. High's voice boomed like thunder, shaking the entire room. His face suddenly turned red, his hands clenched until they turned white. He had suspected for a long time, but now all the truth was exposed before his eyes. The wife he once loved, the woman he had sacrificed so much for, had now betrayed him. sleeping with a stranger. Alice bowed her head, her face pale, her lips trembling, unable to say a word. She never thought this day would come so soon. Mr. Aiden also stood up, hurriedly grabbed the pile of clothes on the bed to cover his body, trying to stay calm, but his eyes flashed with fear. High stepped inside, each heavy step echoing on the floor. His eyes were full of anger, staring at Alice. "This is happiness, what you want," High almost roared. His voice was low, but hid an uncontrollable anger. "Alice, I've worked so hard to keep this family together, and this is what you get in return?" Alice couldn't look into High's eyes filled with disappointment and pain that made her heart turn gray. She once wished for a different happiness, a different love, but at this moment, what she chose seemed to only bring pain. Alice tried to speak, but felt a lump in her throat. "Brother High, I..." Alice stuttered, tears welling up, but she couldn't make any excuses. The truth was too obvious, and she had no words to explain this matter. High looked at her, his eyes filled with pain. He stepped closer, gripping Alice's shoulders. His voice was hard, as if he could not hold on any longer. "Have you ever thought about the children, Alice?" High growled, his eyes red. "They still ask where Mom went, why she didn't come home early. Do you think about them? Or just think about yourself?" High's words were like a knife cutting deep into Alice's heart. She thought of her children, who still waited for her to come home every night. But her heart could not tear itself away from Mr. Aiden, the man who brought her peace and warmth. Mr. Aiden tried to step forward, gently placing his hand on Alice's shoulder, but High pushed him away. His eyes were red, his gaze full of contempt. "What right do you have? Do you think you can replace me in her life?" "Mr. High, please." Alice looked up, her eyes gradually becoming wet, her lips trembling. "I'm sorry, but I can't continue living like this." High looked at Alice in confusion, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "What did you say? You want to leave me, leave the children just to run after this man?" High's voice cracked with each word, sharp. "Yes," Alice insisted, but her eyes were red. "Mr. High, I know I'm wrong, but I don't feel happy in this marriage anymore. I've had enough. I want to find a life where I'm truly loved and shared." High was silent. His eyes became empty. The woman before him, who was once his everything, now stood there with eyes filled with pain. High said nothing more. He let go of Alice's hand. His eyes were blank. Then he nodded gently as if he had accepted this bitter truth. "Then go. I won't hold you back." High's voice dropped, like a whisper in the middle of a storm. "I don't need a wife who betrays the children, nor do I need a mother like you." Alice was silent, her eyes filled with tears. She knew that she had chosen this path, and there was no turning back. She turned away, walking away with heavy steps. She knew she was giving up everything, her family, her innocent children, even her own honor. But in her heart, she still carried a belief. Believe that somewhere there is still true happiness waiting for her. No matter what the road ahead was like, no matter how the rain kept falling, the raindrops were like tears, blending into the broken sadness of all three people. In the darkness and storm that was covering the house, Alice knew that her life had officially taken a different turn. When she chose Mr. Aiden, it was a challenging turn, but also a choice that her heart could not leave. Then I don't know where things will go. Ladies and gentlemen, our story today will stop here. If you find this story interesting, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment about your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next interesting stories. And now, goodbye, and see you in the next videos.